dead in their bed. It appears they were shot to death in their sleep. And investigators allege that this young lady was behind this, and that she also went on social media to try to engineer the court of public opinion and gain sympathy for what had happened. Let's go back into the courtroom now. Her defense team is offering witnesses to support her getting out on bond. They have brought in a friend of hers, a 16-year-old. Let's watch.
And are you and Sarah friends?
Yes, ma'am.
And is Carrie your mom?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I heard your mom say that you guys went to school together. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
At East Coweta?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you gone to school together since then, or that was the last time you went to school together?
I'm going to say 9th grade. She started at East Coweta High School, and then she moved.
Is that when, do you know if that's when she moved with your mom?
I'm going to say yes.
Now, so that was 9th grade, but have you guys continued to be friends since then?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you say friends, talk to me about what that looks like. Are you guys talking on the phone?
Via Snapchat sometimes. We would call, I'd check in on her. I was never allowed over at her house.
But she was allowed at your house?
Yes, ma'am, I'd go and get her.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
I would go and get her.
Okay, you would go and get her. So you have a car?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you have a driver's license?
Yes, ma'am.
And we shouldn't be scared?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm a great driver.
Okay. Now, so you guys have kept in touch over the years, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and when you guys keep in touch, what sort of things do you do?
Well, usually I'd go and get her, and then we'd go to the gas station and get something to eat. It's an hour 30 drive back home, so we'd blast music like teenagers would do, going home. And we'd go home, and I have a 2-year-old son, and we would play with him for hours until he fell asleep. And then we'd watch movies.
Okay.
That's what we do.
Now, at any time have you, well, let me ask this. Have you talked to Sarah since she's been incarcerated?
I have.
And what have those conversations been like?
Telling me she loves me. She's so thankful for me. She's excited to get to go on the jet skis again one day, have fun, be a teenager, and then we pray.
Okay. Now, are you attending church too?
I used to.
Okay. But you're not at Catholic church?
No, ma'am.
Because
that's far. That is far.
No problem. Now, were you in contact with Sarah after the incident happened?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have any concerns about Sarah leaving or running or trying to get away in any way?
No.
Okay. Did she ask you to come pick her up and take her back to Alabama and hide her or anything like that?
No.
Okay. I think that's all I have for you.
Thank you.
State, any questions?
When was the last time that the defendant was in Alabama at your house?
She walked into the courtroom as if the world owed her mercy. Head high, face calm, her hands folded neatly in front of her like she'd practiced it 100 times. The cameras loved her confidence. The murmurs in the gallery told 2 stories, one of disbelief and one of quiet rage. In the front row, her father and grandfather sat side by side, clinging to hope that this was all a terrible mistake. To them, she was still their little girl, the same one who once laughed on the porch and promised she'd never let them down. But on that cold February morning, the truth was waiting, silent, patient, and captured forever on tape. When the lights dimmed and the video began to play, you could feel the air change. Every smile vanished, every whisper stopped. Because in that moment, the courtroom saw what no one was prepared to believe. The teenager they were defending wasn't the victim. She was the one who pulled the trigger. The courtroom was quiet, except for the low hum of cameras and the shuffle of papers. Sarah Grace Patrick sat at the defense table, her expression calm, almost hopeful. She adjusted her blazer and glanced at her father, who gave a faint, reassuring nod. Her attorney leaned in and whispered, "Remember, stay composed. Don't react." She nodded gently, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know. I didn't do this." To those in the room, she looked like any frightened teenager caught in something too big to understand. Her grandfather leaned forward, clutching his hat in both hands, his eyes wet. When the judge entered and the courtroom rose, Sarah stood tall, confident that the truth, or at least her version of it, would set her free. But truth has a way of waiting patiently until it can't be ignored. Months earlier, life on Tyus Carrollton Road in Carroll County was the kind of simple most people take for granted. The Brock family's home sat just off the road, framed by tall trees and a quiet porch where the sound of crickets filled the evenings. 41-year-old Kristen Brock was known for her kindness. She worked part-time at a local clinic, volunteered at church, and always found time to make her daughter's favorite pancakes on Sundays. Her husband, James Brock, 45, was a construction supervisor, the kind of man who came home tired but still helped his youngest with her homework before turning in for the night. Neighbors often waved as they passed, saying the Brocks seemed like the kind of family who had it all figured out. Sarah Grace, at 17, was the oldest. Her friends described her as polite but private. Teachers said she was bright, ambitious, sometimes distant. Her stepfather, James, was strict but patient with her, trying to keep her focused on her future. Kristen, on the other hand, had that protective softness mothers never lose, especially with daughters. A friend once recalled Kristen saying, "She's just growing up fast. I worry about the crowd she keeps." Sarah had started spending more time on her phone, Snapchat, TikTok, texting late at night. Nothing unusual for a teenager, except Kristen noticed her daughter withdrawing from family dinners, her laughter fading into silence. The youngest, barely 6, was the heart of the home. Every night, she'd whisper her prayers out loud before bed. "God bless Mommy, God bless Daddy, God bless Sissy." Sarah would usually roll her eyes, but sometimes, late at night, she'd tuck her sister in and sit on the edge of the bed quietly. Those were the rare moments when she seemed like the same girl everyone remembered. Kristen often told her husband, "She'll come around, it's just a phase." James wasn't so sure. He'd noticed tension between mother and daughter, arguments about rules, grades, and the new friends Sarah wouldn't talk much about. Carroll County was a small place, the kind of town where people remembered your license plate and the color of your mailbox. Everyone knew when something changed, and in the weeks before February 20th, 2025, the Brocks seemed different. Kristen stopped coming to midweek service. James missed a few shifts, telling a coworker he was dealing with some family drama. No one thought much of it. Families argued. Teenagers tested limits. That was normal. What wasn't normal was how quiet the house became at night. A neighbor named Lisa, who lived 3 doors down, told reporters later, usually you'd hear laughter, music, the TV through the windows. But that week, it was dead quiet, like nobody was home. The night before the tragedy, the air over Tyus Carrollton Road was still. Around 11:15 p.m., one neighbor said she heard a faint sound, something sharp, like a door clicking shut or a muffled thud. "It was quick," she told investigators. "I almost didn't think about it. Then my dog barked once and stopped." Inside the Brock home, the night unfolded like any other, or so it seemed. The youngest girl had gone to sleep early, clutching her stuffed animal. Kristen sent her final text to a coworker at 9:47 p.m. saying, "Long day. Heading to bed soon." James watched a short news segment before locking the front door. That would be the last time either of them was seen alive. At 6:32 the next morning, a call came through to the Carroll County 911 center. It was Sarah's voice, calm, controlled, her words deliberate. "Hi, my parents, I think something's wrong. They're not moving." The dispatcher asked, "Are they breathing?" Sarah hesitated. "No, I don't think so." Investigators later replayed that call over and over. Her tone never changed. No panic, no tears, just flat words. "Someone needs to come."
to the teen, saying they have, quote, mountains of evidence. Sheriff's investigators work with the FBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and private forensics labs. As for Patrick's motive, Halsey says investigators are still speaking with her. Halsey says the teen turned herself in this morning after the sheriff's office told her they had warrants for her arrest.
Sarah was seen comforting her little sister, her face tear-streaked but calm. Reporters noted how she seemed collected, even composed, for someone who had just lost her parents. She was shaking, but her voice never broke, one witness said. She kept saying, "I just want to know why this happened." That calmness would later become the center of attention, because in the weeks to come, as detectives pieced together the timeline, something about Sarah's story began to fracture. But for now, in that small Georgia town, the tragedy felt like an act of evil that had come from nowhere. Everyone wanted to believe it was a robbery gone wrong, or maybe an intruder passing through. Everyone wanted to believe Sarah's tears. As the sheriff would quietly tell reporters months later, from the start, there was something about her tone. Something that didn't match the scene we walked into. The town had no idea that the truth hiding inside that quiet house would soon reach every corner of America. Everyone in that courtroom thought they knew what kind of girl Sarah was, until they saw what she did next. The morning of February 20th, 2025, began like any other in the quiet outskirts of Carroll County. The sky was pale gray, and the sun had not yet broken through the trees that lined Tyus-Carrollton Road. Inside the Brock family's home, the youngest daughter, barely 6 years old, woke up to a strange stillness. Her mother usually greeted her with a soft voice, asking, "You want chocolate milk or juice this morning?" But that day, there was no sound of footsteps in the hallway, no smell of breakfast, no warmth coming from the kitchen. She walked barefoot through the living room, clutching her blanket, calling softly, "Mommy?" There was no answer. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. When she reached her parents' bedroom door, it was slightly open. She pushed it with her small hand, and that's when her world changed forever. Her parents were still in bed, side by side, the sheets darkened and unmoving. "Mommy, wake up," she whispered. No response. Her voice grew louder, shaking now. "Daddy, please get up." Then silence. She turned and ran down the hallway, crying out for her sister. Moments later, at 6:32 a.m., a calm voice came through the Carroll County 911 dispatch line. "Hi," the caller said, breathing steady. My parents... I think something's wrong. They're not moving." The dispatcher, a veteran operator who had handled dozens of emergencies, would later tell investigators that it was the most composed teenager she'd ever heard reporting something like that. "Are they breathing?" she asked. Sarah paused for 3 full seconds before replying, "No, I don't think so." Her tone didn't rise, didn't break. It was steady, almost detached. "Can you tell me if there's anyone else in the house?" The dispatcher continued. "Just my little sister," Sarah answered softly. "She's scared." "Stay on the line," the dispatcher said. "Help is on the way." According to the recorded call, Sarah's breathing never changed once during the entire 2 minutes and 41 seconds. Deputies from the Carroll County Sheriff's Office arrived within 10 minutes. Body cam footage later obtained by local news shows an officer entering through the front door, calling out, "Sheriff's Office, anyone inside?" The house was still, the faint smell of gunpowder lingering in the air. Sergeant Michael Turner, one of the first on the scene, recalled in his report, "The front door was unlocked, but there were no signs of forced entry or struggle. Everything inside appeared orderly." In the bedroom, Kristen and James Brock were found lying in bed, both with gunshot wounds to the head. Their cell phones were on the nightstand. Nothing had been taken. A small lamp had been knocked over, but there were no footprints, no broken glass, no ransacked drawers. Turner later told Fox 5 Atlanta, "You could tell they never woke up. Whoever did this was close. They were comfortable in that house. While detectives began documenting the scene, Sarah stood outside with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Neighbors who gathered at the edge of the driveway said she didn't cry much. She just kept rubbing her sister's back, one neighbor told reporters. She looked sad, sure, but there was something about her calmness that didn't sit right. A few minutes later, an investigator asked if she had heard or seen anything during the night. "No," Sarah replied. "I fell asleep early. I didn't even hear the shots." The officer pressed again. "Did anyone come by yesterday? Friends? Delivery?" Sarah shook her head. "No, just us." According to an early incident report obtained by Atlanta News First, investigators noted the absence of defensive wounds on both victims, no sign of forced entry, and a house that appeared undisturbed. As the day went on, the tragedy spread quickly across Carroll County. Local news anchors led their broadcasts with the words, "Double homicide under investigation." Friends and extended family arrived at the sheriff's office, desperate for answers. Kristen's co-workers described her as the soul of the clinic. James's foreman said, "He was a good man, never made enemies. This makes no sense." That same evening, Sarah was taken to stay with relatives. According to one source close to the family, she sat quietly on the couch, scrolling through her phone as detectives came and went. She wasn't hysterical. She wasn't angry, the source said. It was like she was watching someone else's story play out. 2 days later, the funerals were planned. The church filled with flowers and photographs. Kristen's smile in every one, James in his work uniform, their youngest daughter in a small white dress holding her aunt's hand. Sarah stood at the podium and gave a eulogy that was streamed live by a local channel. Her words were polished, thoughtful, even rehearsed. "They were good people," she said, her voice steady. "They didn't deserve what happened. I just ask everyone to keep us in your prayers." Many in the congregation wept. Others, including some of the deputies in attendance, exchanged uneasy glances. Later, Sheriff Terry Langley admitted, "Something about that speech didn't sit right. It was like she was performing grief rather than living it." In the days that followed of tragedy, a young girl who had lost everything overnight. But behind the scenes, investigators were growing uneasy. Detectives reviewing her 911 call noticed how measured her responses were. In interviews, she never asked who did it or why. Instead, she often repeated the same sentence, "I just want this to be over." For trained investigators, that phrasing raised questions. One recalled, "Most people in shock say, 'Who did this?' or 'Why them?' Her focus was on the situation ending, not on finding answers. By the end of that week, forensic teams had combed through every inch of the Brock home. They found shell casings consistent with a small caliber handgun, but no weapon was recovered. Surveillance cameras from nearby homes showed no vehicles coming or going around the time of the killings. The family dog hadn't barked. It was as if the killer had entered quietly, done what they came to do, and left without a trace. Church members spoke in hushed tones, asking who could be capable of something like this. Through it all, Sarah remained publicly composed, her faith posts painting her as a young woman trying to hold her world together. To the untrained eye, she looked like a grieving daughter seeking healing. But to the investigators who were quietly studying her every move, her calmness wasn't comforting. It was concerning. But while the world offered condolences, the investigation began almost immediately after the funerals. Carroll County detectives, led by Sheriff Terry Langley and investigator Michael Turner, combed through every piece of evidence collected from the Brock home. The physical scene told one story. Quiet entry, precision, no panic. But the digital trail was where detectives believed the real truth was hiding. They subpoenaed Sarah's phone records, her laptop history, her social media accounts, and cloud backups. What they uncovered in those files would slowly dismantle the image of a grieving teenager and replace it with something far more calculated. The first red flag came from her phone logs. On the night of February 19th, between 10:47 p.m. and 11:09 p.m., Sarah's phone registered multiple outgoing texts to an unnamed number saved under a single letter. M. those messages had been deleted within minutes of sending. But forensic analysts were able to retrieve fragments through her iCloud backup. One message read, "It's happening tonight. Don't text again." Another, time-stamped just before midnight, said, "It's done." Investigators cross-referenced that time frame with her 911 call the following morning.
Investigators say this is a sad and horrific case, charging a teenager with the murder of her mother and stepfather after 5 months of combing through evidence. This is 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick. She's charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault in connection with the February 20th murder of her mother and stepfather, Kristen and James Brock, in their Carrollton Tyus Road home. The Sheriff's Office Public Information Officer Ashley Halsey didn't single out a single piece of evidence or turning point in the case that led investigators to the teen, saying they have, quote, mountains of evidence. Sheriff's investigators work with the FBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and private forensics labs. As for Patrick's motive, Halsey says investigators are still speaking with her. Halsey says
family and community members who spoke to investigators described Sarah as quiet, polite, and well-spoken. No one could point to a single outburst or breakdown. Her teachers said she returned to online classes briefly after the funeral, answering messages with a simple, "Thanks for checking on me." One friend told People magazine, "She said she just wanted to move on, that she didn't want pity." Yet behind that calm surface, detectives sensed detachment, an emotional absence that mirrored the way she had spoken to dispatchers the morning of the crime. One of the 911 supervisors later told local media, "Most callers are frantic. She was methodical. I even asked another operator if maybe she was in shock, but something about it just didn't fit." Investigators turned to her phone's search history next. They discovered that, in the days leading up to February 19th, Sarah had searched terms like Georgia self-defense laws for minors, what happens if you shoot someone in their sleep, and how long does gunshot residue last. Those searches had been cleared manually, but remnants were still visible in her browser cache. When questioned about it, Sarah reportedly shrugged and said, "I was just curious. I watch a lot of crime videos." That response, detectives later said, was both chilling and dismissive. One investigator noted, "She was almost proud of how calm she was. No remorse, no hesitation." During follow-up interviews, family members began to recall small inconsistencies.
And said goodbye to her daughter, Melissa, on the phone and told her that she loved her. That would be the last conversation they would ever have. Melissa went missing, and for years, it remained a mystery. But in reality, part of the mystery was solved very quickly when some of her remains were recovered chopped up in black trash bags in Atlanta, Georgia, not far from where she lived. But the
detectives theorized that growing tension at home, mixed with outside influence, may have played a role in the tragedy. The investigation deepened when analysts recovered deleted messages between Sarah and a friend from another high school. The texts showed her venting about her parents, controlling everything, and feeling trapped. One message, dated February 14th, read, "They treat me like a kid. They'll see who's really in charge soon." Detectives presented the recovered text to the DA's office as part of their growing evidence package.
To the teen, saying they have, quote, mountains of evidence. Sheriff's investigators work with the FBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and private forensics labs. As for Patrick's motive, Halsey says investigators are still speaking with her. Halsey says the teen turned herself in this morning after the sheriff's office told her they had warrants for her arrest.
Audio experts slowed the recording and isolated background noise. At the 34-second mark, a faint metallic sound could be heard, consistent with the closing of a handgun slide. "We can't say for certain what it was," Turner said in his statement, "but it wasn't the sound of panic. It was the sound of awareness." Even more disturbing, experts detected no quiver in her tone, no elevated heart rate, and no trace of shock. Her breathing pattern remained identical throughout the call. A specialist from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation confirmed. That's almost impossible unless the person was emotionally detached or already prepared for what they were reporting. By early summer, the case had shifted from uncertainty to quiet confidence among investigators. They had no murder weapon, but they had motive fragments, digital breadcrumbs, and behavioral inconsistencies that formed a damning picture. On July 8, 2025, a warrant was signed for Sarah Grace Patrick's arrest. She turned herself in without resistance, arriving at the sheriff's office wearing a gray hoodie and jeans, holding her phone. When asked if she understood the charges, she nodded and said softly, "I didn't do it. You're making a mistake." Sheriff Langley later recalled, "She wasn't scared. She was polite, even thanked the deputy for opening the door." That kind of composure in a moment like that, it tells you a lot. What investigators didn't know then was that the real turning point in this case wasn't the call, or the deleted texts, or the social media videos. It was hidden in a single file, buried deep in her phone's data backup. A file time-stamped just hours before the murders. A file that would soon change everything. They didn't know it yet, but inside that phone was the moment everything would turn against her. By July 2025, the case that had shaken Carroll County was no longer a mystery. It was a countdown. After nearly 5 months of quiet investigation, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office announced that warrants had been issued for 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick.
I'm motioning forward. They're going to grab her. Yep. Did y'all need to approach about anything before we get started? Okay. Media, what I did is I just followed my rule. The first to send in a Rule 22 is the media that got to place their camera in the courtroom. That was Court TV, I believe. They know how to pull. The order's been out there. They should have everything and accommodate everyone with getting you all that you need, because that's the rules. And I've been assured they know how to do that and will accommodate all other media outlets for what you need. All right. All right. Dustin, you ready? All right, this is State of Georgia versus Sarah Grace Patrick. Again, defense, this is your motion. On your motion for bond, you ready to proceed?
I am, Your Honor.
And State, you ready as well? All right, defense, this is your motion, so whenever you're ready.
Thank you.
"I saw her at the funeral," one neighbor told WJCL News. "She was crying, hugging everyone. She didn't look like someone who could do this." Others were less convinced. A church member who attended the memorial recalled, "Her speech felt rehearsed, almost like she'd written it days before. There wasn't a single pause or tear until after she finished speaking." The same footage from that eulogy, once seen as a moment of courage, was now being re-examined through a darker lens. Detectives, meanwhile, worked to reconstruct the final timeline of the murders using cell phone tower data, surveillance footage, and time-stamped activity from Sarah's devices. Between 10:45 p.m. and midnight on February 19th, her phone connected to a tower less than a quarter mile from her home. But at 11:18 p.m., just minutes after the suspected time of the shootings, data showed the phone being manually switched to airplane mode. Forensic analysis later confirmed it remained off for approximately 7 hours, until 6:31 a.m., the exact minute she made the 911 call. Investigators called this the gap, and it became one of the most incriminating patterns in the case. "Phones don't just go silent by accident," investigator Michael Turner told Oxygen. "That was deliberate. Someone didn't want to be tracked." The search for the murder weapon intensified. No gun was found in the home, and there was no record of Kristen or James owning one. However, police discovered a deleted image in Sarah's phone gallery showing a small handgun resting on a folded blanket. The photo's metadata placed it inside the Brock home just days before the murders. When questioned, Sarah claimed it was a picture from online. But experts later proved the background pattern matched the comforter found on her parents' bed. Investigators couldn't determine where the weapon ended up, but they suspected it had been disposed of before police arrived. During her initial interrogation, Sarah remained calm, answering questions without hesitation. When asked why her phone was turned off for so many hours, she said, "My battery was low. I plugged it in and went to sleep." Detectives noted how steady her voice was. Turner later told local press, "Most people, when they're accused, they panic or break down. She didn't flinch." Another investigator recalled asking, "Sarah, can you tell us what happened that night?" Her response was quiet. I went to bed early. I don't remember hearing anything. They asked if she had any idea who could have hurt her parents. She hesitated, then said, "No, but I know it wasn't me." As word of her arrest spread, the story reached national headlines.
Her mother and stepfather. Last month, deputies arrested and charged 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick with murder months after her family members were found dead. Fox 6's Kevin Stewart is live in Carroll County, working hard for us to get some answers. Happening next. Kevin.
Yeah, Alex, Sarah Grace Patrick will be.
The same TikTok videos that once drew sympathy were now flooded with comments like, "You looked too calm for someone who just lost their parents," and "The eyes don't lie." Meanwhile, investigators were piecing together one last piece of the puzzle, where Sarah had been before the murders. Surveillance footage obtained from a nearby gas station showed a car resembling the one registered to the Brocks driving by shortly before midnight on February 19th. The footage was grainy, but the timestamp matched the window of time her phone went dark. Detectives enhanced the video and identified what appeared to be Sarah's silhouette in the driver's seat, wearing a hoodie. According to the case summary later released, the car's route aligned with a small dirt road near a pond 2 miles from the family home. That pond would later be searched by dive teams looking for the missing handgun. The biggest revelation, however, came from a single recovered file in her phone's data backup, the same file that analysts had flagged weeks earlier. It was a short, 10-second video clip automatically saved from her Snapchat app. It showed a dimly lit room, believed to be inside the Brock home. A figure, wearing dark clothing, walks into frame holding a phone camera. A faint voice, similar to Sarah's, says, "I'm done with all of it." Then the video cuts off abruptly. Investigators cross-referenced the video timestamp, 11:14 p.m., the same estimated time her parents were shot. They presented this to the district attorney's office, and from that moment, her defense narrative began to crumble. Because while Sarah continued to insist she was innocent, the proof inside her own phone told a very different story. And when investigators pressed play, the truth spoke louder than any words she'd rehearsed. The trial of Sarah Grace Patrick began in late September 2025 inside the Carroll County Superior Court. For weeks, the courthouse had been surrounded by news vans, reporters, and spectators, hoping to catch a glimpse of the teenager whose name had become synonymous with betrayal. Inside, the courtroom was tense, the air thick with unspoken grief. The state's prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Melissa Carter, opened the trial with a statement that silenced the room. "This case," she said firmly, "is not about an accident. It is about a choice, a deliberate, calculated act by someone who wanted control, and that someone is sitting right there." Her voice echoed as she pointed towards Sarah, who sat beside her defense attorney, head lowered, hands clasped together. She looked smaller than before, her hair neatly tied back, no makeup, no tears. Across the aisle sat her father and grandfather, 2 men who had spent months caught between loyalty and disbelief. The prosecution began with the evidence that had anchored the entire case. They played Sarah's 911 call for the jury, the same call that investigators had listened to countless times. The courtroom was quiet except for her voice coming through the speakers, soft, calm, and emotionless. "Hi, my parents, I think something's wrong. They're not moving." The jury watched her face as her own voice filled the room. She didn't look away. Some jurors exchanged glances, others stared at her, trying to read what she was feeling. Next, prosecutors presented the digital timeline, her phone logs, deleted texts, and the 10-second Snapchat video recorded hours before the murders. On the screen, the dim light flickered, showing her shadowed outline and the faint whisper, "I'm done with all of it." Then the footage cut off. Gasps filled the courtroom. Prosecutor Carter paused before saying, "That's the last timestamp before her parents were shot. There is no mystery here." The defense, led by attorney Mark Harrison, took a different approach. He didn't argue that the evidence was fake. Instead, he claimed Sarah was manipulated, emotionally, mentally, and possibly coerced by someone older whom investigators never identified. She was 17, he told the jury. Impressionable, vulnerable, and struggling at home. The state wants to paint her as a monster, but what they ignore is the pain she was living with. Harrison pointed to the tension between Sarah and her parents, referencing text messages where she wrote, "They won't stop controlling everything." He suggested that Sarah's deleted messages to the mysterious contact M pointed to influence from an outside party. "You cannot convict a child based solely on grief that looks different from yours," he said. His words hung heavy, but the evidence still carried weight. When it was time for family testimony, emotions in the courtroom shifted. Sarah's grandfather followed, holding his hat tightly in both hands as he spoke.
The charges in these murders, what are the feelings, what are the emotions? And I understand that you're standing by her side, you believe she's innocent.
Oh, I'm just in total shock. I mean, because she, first of all, the length of time that's passed and the fact that they arrested her without any evidence that I know of, everything seems circumstantial, and I think they were just desperate to arrest someone and to try, because the case was open for months. A lot of investigation. I know they tried hard to find the murder weapon. They tried hard to find who was involved. They investigated a lot of people. And for them to charge Sarah without, and I'll say this, the investigator told me the day they issued the warrant, when I asked him, I said, well, what proof why did you pick on Sarah? He said, well, she's the only one who could have done it. And that's a quote.
As the trial continued, the prosecution brought in digital forensic experts from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. They testified about Sarah's deleted internet searches. Phrases like, "How long does gunshot residue last?" and "How to make it look like self-defense." One expert told the court, "These weren't accidental searches. They were intentional, purposeful, and directly related to the method of the crime." The jury listened as each detail painted a clearer picture of premeditation. The prosecution ended its presentation with a single sentence that cut through the silence. She didn't cry because she already knew what she'd done. "She asks where her sister is," the guardian said through tears. "And I don't know how to explain that the person she's asking for is the same one accused of taking them away." Some jurors looked down, visibly shaken. Even Sarah lowered her head, her shoulders trembling for the first time. Whether it was guilt or grief, no one could tell. On the morning of October 3, 2025, after nearly 3 weeks of testimony, closing arguments began. Prosecutor Carter spoke with controlled conviction. This was not the act of an impulsive child, she told the jury. It was a conscious decision. She planned it, she executed it, and she covered it up. Justice for Kristen and James Brock demands accountability. When Harrison stood for the defense, his tone softened. "This is a tragedy," he said. "A young girl lost her family, her future, and now faces losing her freedom. But before you condemn her for life, ask yourself this: did she truly act alone, or has the real truth yet to be uncovered?" The jury deliberated for hours, the courtroom packed with reporters waiting for the verdict. Sarah sat motionless, her hands clenched under the table. When the bailiff finally called everyone back in, the air was so quiet that even the sound of chairs moving seemed loud. The foreperson stood, holding the paper that would decide her fate. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Sarah Grace Patrick." He paused, looking toward her. "Guilty on all counts." A muffled cry came from the back of the courtroom. Sarah's father put his head in his hands. Her grandfather whispered, "Lord, have mercy." Sarah didn't move. Her face went blank, eyes empty, lips pressed tight as if holding back a scream that never came. When the judge read the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, Sarah finally turned to look at her family. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. For the first time, her composure cracked, just slightly. As deputies approached to take her away, her father whispered through tears, "I love you, no matter what." She nodded once before being led out of the room. And as the doors closed behind her, the room remained silent, the only sound coming from those who couldn't hold back their grief. When the verdict was read, some cried for justice, others for the girl they'd already lost. When the courtroom lights dimmed and the cameras left, Carroll County was never the same again. The Brock family's home on Tyus Carrollton Road, once filled with laughter and the smell of Sunday breakfasts, stood quiet. Grass began to overgrow around the porch steps, the paint faded, and the windows stayed closed. Neighbors said they couldn't bring themselves to drive by at night. "It's just too hard to look at," one woman told Fox 5 Atlanta. "You see the porch light and remember the people who used to sit there." For sale signs came and went, but no one ever stayed long. The house carried too much history, too much heartbreak. Weeks after the trial, the community came together for one final memorial in honor of Kristen and James Brock. Inside the same church where Sarah had once stood to give her eulogy, the pews were filled again. But this time, the tone was different. There were candles on the altar, framed photos of the couple smiling at a family picnic, and a small stuffed toy placed in front of their pictures by their youngest daughter. Pastor Dennis Hughes, who had known the family for years, stood at the pulpit and said, "Evil doesn't always wear a stranger's face. Sometimes it comes from the ones we love most." His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Family and friends wept, quietly as the choir sang Amazing Grace. Outside, neighbors hugged each other, whispering prayers for the little girl who had lost everything. The youngest daughter, now living with relatives out of state, started a new school that fall. Her guardians told reporters she rarely spoke about that night, though sometimes she'd ask if her big sister was still in trouble. According to family members, she kept a framed picture of her parents beside her bed, and every night she would touch it before falling asleep. A neighbor close to the family told WJCL, "She still remembers their voices. You can tell. She hums songs her mom used to sing." Social workers say her progress has been slow but steady. "She's resilient," one said, "but the kind of loss she's endured, it doesn't fade. It just finds quieter places to live inside you." Meanwhile, Sarah Grace Patrick began serving her sentence at Pulaski State Prison, one of Georgia's most secure facilities for women. In her first interview request, which was later denied, she told her attorney she still planned to appeal. "I didn't do it," she reportedly said. "They made up their minds before I even spoke." Those words echoed the same ones she used during her interrogation months earlier. Prison officials confirmed she has no disciplinary issues and mostly keeps to herself. One staff member described her as polite but detached, spending most of her time reading or writing in a notebook. Occasionally, she receives letters from her father and grandfather. Sources close to the family say the letters are simple: updates, prayers, reminders that she's still loved despite everything. But others, including members of the extended family, have chosen silence. "Forgiveness takes time," a cousin told People, "and for some of us, it may never come." For the community of Carroll County, the shock of the case turned into a painful reflection. At the annual candlelight vigil held that winter, residents spoke about the need for compassion and awareness. "This wasn't just about one act of violence," Sheriff Langley said during the event. "It's about how quiet pain can sit inside a home until it explodes." His words resonated with many parents in attendance who held their children a little closer that night. A small scholarship fund was later established in memory of Kristen and James, aimed at supporting students in the local high school pursuing careers in nursing and construction, the fields they worked in. "Something good has to come from all this," one organizer said through tears. Inside the prison, Sarah's days follow a strict routine: wake-up call at 5:30 a.m., breakfast, work detail, then evening lockdown. Her fellow inmates refer to her simply as the quiet one. She rarely talks about the case, but those who've interacted with her say she still insists she's innocent. She just says, "I'm not who they think I am," one former inmate told Oxygen. Still, investigators maintain there's no evidence anyone else was involved. For them, the case is closed. For the surviving family, the pain remains open-ended. The once lively home at 1078 Tyus Carrollton Road now stands as a reminder of everything lost. The porch light still burns. Neighbors say a relative keeps it on in memory of Kristen and James. Some nights, when the wind moves through the trees, it sounds almost like a voice calling from the past, a whisper of the life that once filled that home. People in town still talk about the case in low voices, especially around anniversaries. "We just can't make sense of it," one resident said quietly. "You don't expect something like that to happen here." And maybe that's the hardest part, the not knowing why. Because behind every case like this, there's a question we still can't answer. How does love turn into silence, and silence into tragedy? In the end, what happened inside that quiet Georgia home will forever echo far beyond the walls where it began. This case isn't just the story of a teenager accused of ending 2 lives. It's the story of a family that once sat together for dinner, laughed through ordinary nights, and believed that love could weather anything. It's the story of a community that trusted what they saw: a smiling daughter, a proud mother, a steady stepfather, and learned too late that appearances can hide unbearable pain. The social media posts, the polished tributes, the tears that looked real but never quite reached her eyes. All of it became part of a narrative that blurred the line between truth and performance. Every smile she shared online, every prayer she asked for, carried a question that still hangs in the air. What was real, and what was rehearsed? Today, when the wind moves across Tyus Carrollton Road, that house still stands in silence. Neighbors say at night, one porch light still flickers faintly, a small glow in the dark. For some, it's a sign of remembrance. For others, it's a warning that evil doesn't always wear a stranger's face. And for those who knew Kristen and James Brock, that single light isn't just memory. It's a haunting reminder that behind every perfect-looking life, there can be secrets no one ever saw coming.